David Weck, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, brother. I'm stoked.
Well, I'm very excited as well.
I've been training for the last year with Connor Milstein, who trained under you and learned quite a bit from you. And he turned me on to a lot of your work. Most people know you from the Bosu ball, right? So, I mean, that was something that kind of took over the fitness industry as like a really cool instrument. I think it had because stability balls had already made their way into the gyms and fitness world from a functional strength standpoint. It had like less of a hurdle, less of a hill to climb with the people adopting it. Like right from the jump, we could see the benefit from it. You've created so many things that I want to dive into each of these things, but training with Connor, he told me that you've got a story behind everything you've invented, and I really want to dive into that and understand those stories. I also know a good buddy of mine, Adam, was a teammate of yours, co-captain the football team in high school. I was like,
Yes,
that's
that's right.
a
That's
weird. It's like a really weird, like small world shit. Like we're both here in Texas. You guys were in, I think, New Jersey. So I was just like, this is oddly funny and small, but I'm so pumped to dive into all these things. Tell me, tell me about your life like growing up. What were the sports you were into? What were the things that drove you and moved you in the way that you did, not only physically but mentally as well? What your attractions were?
well. I loved athletics. I loved just the wind blowing through my hair. I used to tell my parents I run like the wind, and so any and all sports as a youngster, and then baseball, soccer, basketball. My father didn't let me play organized football as a kid. So I started playing at the high school level and then played through college. And I played with Adam Shell at Madison High School, where we were co-captains with another guy who was the quarterback. So I always took football as serious as if I were going to go to the NFL, with just the buffer of next year's sophomore year, next year's junior year. So I don't have to really think. I just get to do what I like to do until senior year, and then I'm contemplating coaching, contemplating, do I play in France, semi-pro or something. And I basically had arrived at maybe I do coaching. I wrote Bill Belichick a letter. He was with the Browns at that point. He had gone to Wesleyan, and I went to Williams. They're sort of sister competitive schools. But then I ultimately decided I don't want to be a coach because of the nomadic existence, where if you're trying to climb the ladder and head coach leaves, well, guess what? You don't live there anymore. And I didn't want that, no geographical control of where I'm going to be, and hurry up and move is always around the corner, maybe. So what I did was I abandoned going to Wall Street, which I had been slotted for. I worked on Wall Street the summer before graduation. And then when it came time to, okay, this is going to be your life, I just said, no, I can't. So I pursued acting. And it was, sort of an exercise self psychology, a lot of, just taking lumps, learning how to deal with rejection until, you become very courageous on the stage, as it were, because you've taken so many lumps that lumps they don't hurt anymore. uh, and then I was rollerblading in Manhattan for 6 years. I was a personal trainer to make my living, and I was an actor. And if you called me a personal trainer, I'd be upset because I was an actor, right? The personal trainer just a means to the ends here. Like, I'm not a trainer. Um, and now I have a great respect for training, whereas once I sort of had that highfalutin Williams College, you got to make a lot of money, otherwise you're worth less. I feel a little differently now. But so I discovered rollerblade. I love efficiency, so I did not walk for 6 years because I always had skates on. I just put them on, I'd leave them on, and at the end of the day, take them off. And so it could be 16 hours in skates, if I were outside the whole day. And my feet got exceptionally weak. I knew none of what I understand now about movement in the body. So I dropped a motorcycle one day. I twinged my back. I collapsed with like white hot pain a couple days later with a client. And it was more than a year of chronic back pain whilst I tried to figure it out. And courses of therapy, blah blah blah, and nothing was working. I would just take so many pain medications, naproxen, the Aleve bottles I was buying, the bottles that tall, and I drink a lot of alcohol. It was just sort of unwind, I guess statistically alcoholic, but 6 drinks, I'm not even impaired, so I wouldn't call myself alcoholic. Um, and I went toxic, and I didn't stop until it was like, okay, the gun is now up against your head. Like my body was so just eviscerated, my digestion, my liver, everything. But it erodes you from the inside. So you don't, if you're not paying attention or you don't care, not, looking at the signals, then it sort of creeps up on you all at once because you're sort of eroding from the inside. Now, to reconcile them and remedy it, make it better, that's also an egg that you have to unscramble. So I still deal with consequences of those days. And it was the stability ball that gave me sort of light at the end of the tunnel, sort of that reflexive writing and adjusting. You can tend to, take some tiny little spinal muscle that's just locked in. He don't want you to be in pain, or you don't want you to hurt the cord, and he not letting go. All those like quick reflexive things can sort of coax that little guy into relaxing. And then as far as organize, I started standing on the ball. I saw a guy named Paul Check, who's a very, very big influential fitness leader. And he was really probably most responsible for bringing the stability ball from the rehab to the training room. And you're right, the Bosu ball like rode the crest of popularity of the stability ball. So when I was standing on a ball July 25th, 1999, I'm watching the Knicks lose to the San Antonio Spurs, and I'm on a big ball. I close my eyes, tilt my head, boom, I slip out. I land with my butt on the ball. I backflip and land with my head and neck against cinder block. And I just started kicking my feet to make sure I could still do it. Then I'm pondering, like, how do I keep doing this without killing myself? Or what if I cut the ball in half? Boom! Oh my, I recognized instantly that if I can patent this thing's going to be, that's the American dream. I'm going to make, I'm going to make my money, because I was starting to sweat, not making money at 29 years old, pursuing acting with a bunch of close calls, but nothing big landed in the boat. How much longer am I going to give this? What am I going to do? Like those questions, because 30 is sort of a landmark if you care about having a family and kids. You
Yeah.
want you want to sort of have a lay of the land by the time you're 30. And when I was approaching 30, there were wait a minute, this is like sort of nothing or everything, and it's right now it's nothing.
It's funny you mentioned that. That 30 was much harder for me to grapple with than 40, and it was for that very reason. I was in the UFC. On one hand, I'm living my dream. I've made it. I'm a professional athlete. I'm a professional fighter. And then on the other hand, I'm making dog shit money. I live in my mom's detached garage because the Bay Area's rent is through the roof, and had no medical insurance, no 401k, and like nothing set aside for the future. Not even a plan for like what I was going to do when I finished. And
Yeah,
I'm watching guys like Don Fry and Dan Severn, who are like 50, 60-year olds still taking like these $1,000 fights because that they just can't stop. It's the only thing they know. And I'm like, dude, I can't be that guy. I can't do this. And especially knowing the toll it would take on me. But 30 was a big, like, holy shit moment for me to reconcile, where am I at in life? Where do I want to go? What is the plan now? And same thing. Wanted a wife and kids, didn't have them, but it very much was on my mind. Like the provider energy just sunk in at a left field. And then again, 3 years later, when we had my son, it was like, boom, now you got to do this.
that's the ultimate responsibility. Is once you have kids and you're worth your seed, well, then they become the priority. That's how I look at it.
I think no question. If you're doing it right, you got to fill your cup as well. But everything circles around that thing
Yeah,
being the most important for sure.
absolutely. Yep, that's
So
true.
so you invent the Bosu ball.
Yes.
You finally get some cash. You've been trying to act and have a couple of gigs here and there, but nothing that really sinks in. Nothing that launches you off. No lift off. Walk us through from that point on.
Yeah, so basically it was ready, fire, aim, because I was just all passion, enthusiasm, and I had that cellular belief, like gut belief, that this thing was valuable, and if I played it correctly, that could be my financial, sort of nest egg, or just the thing that I can make money on, where I don't have to do, you say jump, I don't have to jump because I got the money coming in the mailbox. And so anyway, it was a a journey of sort of, the way I marketed it was, I sold the very first 2 units and then 26 units to the US ski team. So my rationale was, okay, I'm no one. This thing is just, duct tape and a ball, just to have a viable prototype. But I've trained age ranges from like 7 years old to 92 years old, male, female. There's application for everyone. This is only confirming my belief that this will become a ubiquitous training tool. How do I do it? Well, I'm going to validate the very top, because if it makes them better and they testify to that, well, the likelihood it's going to make you better is, very strong. So with that sale to the US ski team, I went to the championship teams, the Yankees, the Lakers, the New Jersey Devils, and the Los Angeles Rams. They were the respective in the big four sports, the championships. And I sold it to each one of them, and I sold it. So I was charging $99, probably cost me 300 or 400 to make the thing, but it was the principle, right? And it was a different era where the space was not as crowded as it is now, right? So there were fewer products in the marketplace. Once you start to see that, oh, people are succeeding with products in the marketplace, well, that just brings more products into the marketplace. And for years and years, I did the trade shows. Half the year, half the weekends at a year, I'm somewhere, carnival barker, getting people to experience the Bosu ball. And so, like, that was a big part of the puzzle. And this is where the acting background came in very handy, because I was able to perform and read their reactions at the same time and give everybody an experience that they won't forget. And so the way I would get, trade shows, a lot of booze, people just walk by. And it's an uncomfortable, like if I make eye contact, then I just say hi, but I could get everyone in my booth. So I'd have $100. I'd be like, "You want $100? You want $100? Yeah, what 100? What do I got to do? Just got to stand on that sucker. That's all you got to do." Like, yeah, I'll do that. All right, come on in. Take your shoes off now, because the thing wasn't strong like a factory one. So I didn't want someone to pop it. So, take your shoe. I got to take my shoe. Yeah, $100. So anyway, I'd have them stand 1 foot, eyes closed, for 10 seconds. No one ever did it. And then, so after they fail, right, I keep my $100. You'd use that as bait for years. Then $800 bill. And then what I would do is, once we had established and broken the ice there and the crowd was gathering, then I would have them just stand on it with two legs and close their eyes. And I would say to them, "You are going to react in a manner that I have a piece of paper in my pocket. What's on my pocket is what you're going to do from this little experience." And so I had a paper that said "smile," because you're very safe on a Bosu ball in the dome. So it's threatening to lose your balance, but if you're not threatened by that loss of balance, it represents this sort of very odd experience in life where you just failed at balance and you didn't get hurt and it was no big deal and it was universal. Everybody smiled when they had that, like, close your eyes, move your head, what? And then they smile. Universal, because I think a human being really does want to learn. And I think many of us, especially when we become an adult, you could go weeks at a time and you haven't learned a damn thing. And life is beating you down. But, you learn something. There's something magical in that. And especially when it's this deep, profound somatic experience, is something as profound as your balance that you never think of, right? So that was sort of, and my logic there was, I want to make an indelible mark in every person that comes by that booth. I wasn't even collecting emails. I couldn't even sell the product. I was literally like, startup mode. I'm taking the investment money to bang the drum and put this on the map whilst I run under the manufacturing and the selling of the prototypes and banging the drum. That was marketing, right? So I sold it to the ski team. Yeah, it cost me the flight and whatever the material costs and my time, right? But now I had a story up and running, and all of my inventions stem from my personal exploration to become more to build more physical prowess defined as fight, flight, response ability, because that is the sort of the fundamental connection between the lower brain and the upper brain is fight flight. And the last thing we want to do is freeze. And if you haven't sort of trained the reactions, that you will respond how you respond based upon the reaction. And the reaction, and it's reflexive, right? If somebody startles you, your body's going to respond, and you can weaponize the response like Tony Blauer teaches his spear system, because you're going to flinch. The bad guy gets to tell you when the fight starts, and you're the good guy, so you don't start the fight. So now you're in a reactive position. And unless you have sort of gone through it and learned how to respond, the tendency will be uprooting and helpless in that initial move. And you have to be Barry Sanders, where you drop the center and raise the base, boom, boom. That's your best first reaction. Put the sticks up and root, right? Rapidly root. And if you don't do that, you don't have fight flight responsibility. And then all of the psychological aspects of that, because I mean, in my experience, the better you become at an MMA fighter, the more chill and cool you become at the bar. Like when you meet a new person, you're not sizing them up to see, like, could I take the guy? You just know, like, that guy wouldn't even have a chance, so I'm going to be nice to him. You know what I mean? So I don't think prowess in martial arts leads to some, you become an animal. I think it actually sophisticates the human being with a profound sense of confidence that can't be purchased. You can't fake it. This is pheromonal, right? When you're in a room with men, there's a certain sense, right? And a certain presence that someone either has or doesn't. And acting, I learned, when you're afraid, tension rises in the body, right? And if tension is rising in the body, you don't have root. And if you don't have root, you don't have resonance. And if you don't have resonance, hard to stand in a room with men and tell them something that they're going to be interested in listening to and then ultimately doing, right? So and that's the unwritten social order, right? Where
Mm.
you just size it up, just boom, you get a sense. And so one of the devices that I invented, that my next invention, was called the Quick Hands Bola Trainer. And I don't know if, oh, here, I got one right here. So this device right here is two foam balls attached by an elastic cord. And I was doing all sorts of visual tracking, eye hand coordination with this tool. And I created it because I was experimenting with the concept of a pendulum, swinging the pendulum in an arc over the shoulder and catching it, and then increasing the balance demands by, like, stand on one foot, swing it and track it and catch it. So you're dealing with the vestibular, the ocular visual, and the proprioceptive while completing a fine-tuned motor task. It will only help you athletically. If you can maintain your balance and pick something out of the sky, easy, right? And I had just used materials laying around. I had a hacky sack and I had an elastic cord that I had cannibalized off some exercise equipment. And then I would sort of, at the end of it, I would, like, bounce it up and catch it. So I boom, boom. And I was like, oh, that's really neat. So then I fashioned the very first one, and I discovered that if I flung this thing out and yanked it back, I could bring this ball coming back at me at more than 110 miles an hour. And we're talking, 6 feet away, 5.5, 6 feet away, 110 miles an hour. You do have the control of this hand, which is not controlling it with that much dexterity in the beginning. So you still have that randomness of your lack of ability to set it and direct it, but you can and get better at it to the point where you could close your eyes if you'd practiced it enough. But just being able to snap this thing out and catch a ball right here and stand in to 110, right? That gives you a lot more confidence that you could stand in with something that's not going to be going 110 miles an hour, like somebody's fist, for
Mm-hmm.
example, right? And Bruce Lee, it's always about cut the angle. The Tai Chi principle that my opponent launches their attack first, but I arrive before. And so I I draw from the Asian, the Orient, the Eastern martial arts, medicine, and was able to glean from that perspective with all the meridians and the energetics and these little Tai Chi idioms, move without moving, like little things that encapsulate the martial science. And it dovetails perfectly with the Western, sort of reductionist, mechanistic, Descartian. Okay, we're going to examine every component, and the Eastern's much more big, broad stroke, yin yang, right? We have quantum.
Holistic, yeah.
Yeah. So, but the truth is the truth. So you could take this road, you could take this road, and you take both roads. Now you understand it even deeper. And when you understand it deeper, you go further, because what happens is new insight changes the perspective. And now suddenly you can see that which you didn't see before. So you're more enlightened to that your next creation can have the benefit of all that aggregation of knowledge, information, right? And so it was always my personal development that led me down the next path. And so the Bola, this thing failed in the sense that, I ordered 2,500 units and it took me forever to sell them. And inventory costs money. Yeah, I can't buy, eggs with this thing. So the conversion to cash took too long for it to be a profitable venture. So you abandon it for the time being. I think once things are up and running and everyone knows my name and they all trust me, then the possibility for, this kind of coordination tool could be there. But the challenge is Duncan, the Duncan yo-yo that you got in your stocking when
Mm-hmm.
you were 6? Yeah, I did too. If Duncan had launched that yo-yo post PlayStation, it would have failed, because,
Yeah.
what kid is going to, suffer the indignity of trying to actually learn a yo-yo? Fuck that. I'm going to press buttons. But my next big innovation came in 2004. I was teaching at a trade show and exhibiting, and across from my booth was Buddy Lee. And Buddy Lee is like one of the world's best jump ropers, Olympic wrestler, US Marine. Guy's amazing. And so every, hour or so, he'd put on the little display, doing his crazy, amazing jump rope. And when I was observing it, I was like, there's a lot of times when that rope goes around him where he's not jumping through it. So whiz, 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 jump through, whiz, 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 jump through. And so what I did was I was like, all right, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to remove the jump through. I have no desire to get tired in this process. I have no desire to pound the power out of me on a cement ground with this low amplitude trillion repetitions, right? Great for changing your feet when you fight, but it's not good for a linebacker who has to go 10 yards over there, right? So it's, jumping rope is good, but, too much of it will pound the power out of the power athlete, right? So that process, I said to myself, 30 days, I will train with this voraciously because I want to get just as good as Buddy Lee, but I will not jump through it. And so that, I guess, decision was catalytic to the discovery that this thing called rope flow, There's 4 fundamental patterns given 2 arms and a body with a rope connecting them. There's only 4 fundamentals. And when you reduce those down to muscle memory, you are 100% integrated. Every molecule of mass integrated, moving together from my fingertips to my feet, everything. So this right here, this is the ground. It doesn't matter where it is in space. This is the ground when it makes contact. So I discovered this, and because a rope is not a proprietary product, I never tried to sell ropes, because my logic was, if I Sherpa this thing into significance, then Rogue with buying power just takes all the business, right? They're selling it for what I have to pay for it, kind of a thing. So I always taught people rope flow. I sold a DVD from way back, but it has since built and built and built this organic growth. And when COVID hit, it sort of just crystallized into a thing that I think there's probably hundreds of thousands of people all over the world doing it now. And I call it the Rosetta Stone of movement training modalities. If you get handy, very simple with a rope, that is a rite of passage now, that any skill, mental, physical, you will be able to acquire and assimilate that skill faster and deeper than without the foundation of rope flow. And I believe that. My best performing video on Instagram, 5 million views. I'm like, if I could only tell you one thing before I exit the stage, is learn 4 patterns with this rope. Like, you learn those, you are a better you. And so that acts as this incredible goodwill equity within the marketplace. And the visual equity is profound, because we've never seen someone doing the rope and never jumping through. And it is a bridge to jumping rope, should you want to do it, because now you're so facile with the rope that, coordinating that pattern will be easier than had you had no experience with the rope. And it opens up the trickery where you're crossing, all kinds of stuff that is more fun to watch. So that goodwill brings people into this training philosophy, because if you like one thing, well, what else is there? So that's big. Then I have a bunch of patents, and I have a bunch of other inventions, one of which is the RMT Club. I was a,
But hold on, definitely want to dive into that. Let me cut you off here for a second.
yeah,
I just want to
please.
say I want to comment. I
I'll just
want to
keep
comment
going.
on the rope. This is great, but I was like, no, I got to talk about the rope first, and then I want to talk RMT Club. Let me actually rewind it to the balls. I remember when I was getting ready to walk on at Arizona State. I was training at a place I played football there, so I was training at a place called the Rikus Center to work on my 40-yard dash time and things like that.
I know the
And I
right.
saw guys.
I
Oh,
know
it's one
that
of the best
place.
places, Menlo, right? Yeah,
Yeah, I
phenomenal.
know that
I'm sure they
place.
got a ton of your gear. Yeah, I
Well,
trained there for a long time as a teenager.
my sister-in-law worked. Gary was his name.
Yeah, Gary Rikus.
Gary, yeah, shit. My sister-in-law worked like super closely with Gary and the whole team.
That's so cool. They were
Yeah, so
next level. I mean, they were training like the Golden State Warriors. They were doing a lot of pro athletes. And then I
yeah,
went back to them when I was fighting in the UFC because I had moved back home. I was training out of San Jose at an American Kickboxing Academy. I was like, I should just head up to the Rikus Center and get some good training in. But I remember like Nike had created like balls that would light up with LEDs, and
yeah,
people were bouncing them against a wall to catch it. And I was thinking, like, if they could just make that faster, it would probably have a little bit more application for a fighter. So, like, knowing that thing can come back at 100 miles an hour, that's like the overspeed training Bruce Lee talked about with why he liked Kali so much and why they practiced that in Jeet Kune Do was because the tip of that stick, when they're doing JKD or Kali flows, the stick moves so much faster at the end of it that
yes,
if you can begin to see that and block and move and find your own coordination, then that opens everything up into a similar flow with the arms. So things are relaxed, it's reflexive, but you're also able to see everything from the periphery better. So
yes.
that just when I comment on the balls, like that's a freaking fantastic idea. You see like different things. Like now they had whatever that dorky boxing thing that went out last Christmas. Like the
Oh
Bobby
yeah,
Kennedy was doing it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
it's
they're
a
just
cat
pop, pop, pop,
toy.
pop.
It's fun. It's fun
Yeah,
and
there's like
useful.
it's a cat toy, exactly. Like get some
Yeah,
7-year-old from Sweden can do a million punches, you know.
yeah,
But you know, I think those things will catch on, and just how you're framing this, because you kind of broke it down really quickly, and um, I know you've taught Connor a lot of this. Connor breaks down this as well. Is that the balance, and if I've been like in Fight Club, if you've never been in a fight before, how much could you really know about yourself, right? Well, most people who've never been in a fight before don't think about it. They assume at best, like what keeps them calm on the exterior is I live in a safe neighborhood. I'm a man. Nobody's going to mess with me. Police are nearby. I've got a good buddy on the police department, whatever the thing is.
yeah.
I lift weights so I can find I'll be able to take care of myself kind of deal. But deep underneath all that is the truth, and if you haven't experienced anything like that, right? Like then that's a background. It's like a base layer app running in the background. And I've thought about that too, because as you talked about fighters, I was thinking about jujitsu guys, like black belts in jujitsu. There might be 2 in 1,000 that are really arrogant, but still
Yeah.
deep down, they're totally funny. Like they don't have nothing to prove. Even if they are arrogant, there's a calmness to them from the thousands of reps they got submitted, the thousands of times they were hurt from not tapping, and that humbling and rehumbling and rehumbling as a white belt, blue belt, purple belt, all the way up. Not only builds, it comes with the experience of becoming a master, is also having your ass kicked the whole way up the ladder. So I think about that's like I told my son, he's 10 now. I said, you can choose any sports you want to play. You can pick any instrument you want to play, but you're going to play music till you're 18 and you're going to do jujitsu until you're a black belt. Anything you want to add to that? Cool. And he just did his first season of football. He absolutely loves it. So I'm starting to think more along these lines too, balance, x-axis, that kind of stuff, because, when you're in space, your ability to change direction is that half a second that gets you to make the play or miss the play. So I just want to comment on the balls. It's super cool. And then I'm probably a white belt with the rope flow now. It's funny because like one of the things that I enjoy about anything that I'm working with, that's something you've developed, is there's like a mandatory, you're going to suck at first, so it's humbling, because like I have to come with a beginner's mind. There's no, like, even like an expert boxer, they should know when they step on a jiu-jitsu mat, they're going to get smoked.
Yeah.
Boxing's not going to transfer, just not. If you're a D1 wrestler, it's going to transfer somewhat, but probably not to black belts if you're a white belt. The point being, it's been a lot of fun for me working with new modalities that build balance. And there's other things that happen with the rope flow. For me, I've had like like fighting, you're always in this locked forward position. Jiu-jitsu, everything's in front facing. You're driving a car, same kind of deal. You're at the dinner table, same deal. You're on the computer, all these forward rolled positions, and that can really lock up the thoracic. And sure, you can foam roll and hug the body to get the thoracic to pop, but that's not the same thing as what you're talking about. You're talking about, how do I get the body to move, like with the stability ball, where I can articulate things in a way that just starts to grease the groove and unlock the little tight spots that don't want to let go. They're there to protect you, right?
Yes.
But I've noticed that with the rope flow, it's like within 2 minutes, my thoracic feels so good, so much better. My shoulders naturally drop back, my chin drops down, and I just feel completely open in a way that's I don't think there's many modalities that can accomplish that. So I just want to see people look at the rope flow, and I didn't get it either until Connor put one in my hands. I'm watching these guys, I'm like, damn, that looks cool, but I don't know if that's for me. I don't know what the benefit would be. I jump rope for MMA with a buddy, Lee Speed rope. I'm doing plyometrics, I'm doing other things, and I get a lot of Connor stuff. And he's like, "Trust me, you're gonna like this." And it's been an absolute game changer for my spine. Which is
Yes.
everything else coming off of that has improved because of it. So I just want to say that's really cool that you did that. Um, and then dive into the RMT club, because that's been one of my personal favorites, especially being in this damn front position for so long, to
Right.
get to open up the subscap and get everything greased and opened up in a natural, organic way. I think they're phenomenal tools.
Well, and that brings me back to something you said about the Kali, right? The Eskrima, because the stick, the stone, and the rope, those are the first and most fundamental tools slash weapons for humankind. First one is a stick. You need a stick. If you don't have a stick, you are dinner, and you don't get dinner, right? And then stones, very, very functional. What if you want to pick up a big one, right? There's this enveloping strong with a stone, and a stone can also be manipulated with spirals where you can move without moving, right? Because if I have a
Mm.
reference point here and I can go all the way around it and it didn't move, well, that's very useful for not letting the opponent interpret your movement because what he's feeling ain't moving. Right? So, I want to be so sensitive that I'm invisible. And if you're good with a stick, that means you're good with your hands, like by definition. And if you never have the instrument, which is the teacher, the coach can tell you how to use the teacher for maximum benefit, but it is the teacher in your hand, the stick, that makes sure that you're true, right? Because if the stick is true, so are you. And the rope, you'll tend to take on the qualities of the tools that you're manipulating. And with the rope, it is this fluidity and the spine feels so good. And we reduce everything down to external and internal torsion. So if you basically drew a 40, like on a 45-degree relationship, so you're not the front, you're not the side, but sort of 45 degrees down, if you think of that right there is the window that inside here is internal and enveloping around is external, and you can sort of find that line. I taught this to Nsima Inyang, who is he's up and coming, huge influencer, and he's just the most wonderful person. And God smiled when he made Nsima. I mean, physically, the guy is unbelievable, super coordinated, super jacked, right? And natural. Like he's born this way, plus the enhancement through movement. And he just recently got his black belt. And when I taught him this sort of internal, external transition, he texted me. He's like, David, I am tapping so many people in so many new ways with such little effort because what I told him is the name of the game is moving your bones because your bones are strong no matter what. And if you can position the bones in that architecture with the seamless, fluidity of the float of those bones, that'll ultimately define the best that you can be. Because when the burden is on the bones, then there's not much burden on the body and the soft tissues where forces can flow. And being tight, which I would define tight as you have some interaction and you're sitting there giving him all this information, right? It's all random, and you're just the second the force is not moving forward and back with its overall intent, you go like this. Well, okay, this is a useless move, right? Because if he's not defending, you created no damage waxing on and waxing off. It is the Bruce Lee intercepting fist, right? These angles. And so that's basically what it is. And the RMT, so a club is another version of a stick, and it was very useful once upon a time. Essential, I would call it. And I collected these clubs because when I get into something, I go very, deep quickly. I overdo everything. So I had an entire collection of these things, and none of them had the inherent qualities that I was looking for in terms of the speed and safety of moving a club at speed. So the solution was to take a club head that's not like super solid, maintain its shape, but it has a little bit of, flexibility from being rubber, very hard rubber kind of thing. And then I filled it with only partially with steel shot, an aggregate shot. So we have the shifting weight and the feedback that you can create. And we're principally using two hands on one club, whereas most of the club training is, a lot, unless you're talking about a mace, that would be sort of the
Mm.
two hand application. But because I have two hands on this thing, now I can really train non dominant and dominant, compare and contrast. And I've got movements with physical feedback, audible feedback. And if I go fast and make it centrifugal, then it's silent. If I want to accent and go and create these like I'm pulling the club down, it's vertical, I get the chit, and then I shoot it up, and then the shot goes down. So I'm here taking it, and I'll go pop pop. And with the precise coordination that when it sounds right and looks right, it is right. And now I've just put my shoulders integrated with my whole body through a faster, more complicated movement. And that creates better carryover. And as a fitness device, it's great too, because you can sit there and swing the club in different patterns and actually get a workout. And it's an expansive workout, not a compressive workout. So it's a nice counterbalance to, because most of the time exercise is compressive, right? You're squeezing your muscles, and you're squeezing to get your muscles stronger. But with this expansive force, you're sort of always like pulling into center, and you get this timing where all of your mass gets to boom boom down up on beat. And jumping rope is a syncopated beat where the hands go down and the feet come up. Great for switching, bang bang. You can be on power stance, power power. Very, very useful. Good exercise, right? But the priority is the beat with rotation. That is the beat. Hands down, feet down, body down, boom, invest in down, do it real well, deliver that force clean, boom, you get to receive it and express it clean. And that is the ultimate foundation, is the force has to be clean, otherwise it's restricted. And fighting, one of the great things about fighting is, well, first of all, it's more embarrassing to lose a fight than it is to lose a basketball game, in my opinion. Right?
Yes, it is.
Losing a fight is like, what's worse? I lost a fight, right? And the game is so infinitely complex, and fighter A will beat B, but B will beat C, and then C will beat A. So styles make fights, right? There isn't one universally agreed on greatest of all time, because somebody's going to say John Jones and somebody's going to say someone else. Doesn't matter who's right. They got their reasons. But Usain Bolt and flight, easy, 100% objective. We know who the greatest of all time is in the 100-meter dash. And it's unequivocal. You can't argue against it. And so, with that, going back to fight and flight, the foundation, we have an objective measure. So, it can be, a scientific process, because I can now quantify exactly the result of the given inputs when it's objective. But fight, infinitely complex, relies first and foremost on locomotion. So if I can enhance the locomotive strategy, that I can shift my weight without ever losing balance. And athletes don't fall. What we do is we drop into balance. We don't fall, right? Whilst others are falling and freaking out, what we're doing when we're trained is we are solving the problem, right? So we're going right to productivity and just bypassing protection, because protection and pathetic, you're probably going to get hurt. Whereas if you can solve the problem, and then now you don't even have to fall, you just dropped into balance, that's the best we can be. And the tool, again, being the teacher, makes investment in that tool give a greater return in an area where you haven't been training all your life, right? Because even if you play with a tennis racket, you're expert with a tennis racket, but there may be some things with a stick and a club and a rope that you're not really facile at, because you haven't done the pattern 10 million times. But having increased the bandwidth that you can rotate any and all, right, and it's all perfect, everything's integrated, well, then that'll translate into you being able to take that enhanced capacity and the subtlest little nuance control the tennis racket better, right? And at the highest level, we're talking about gains that are a millimeter are very difficult to get at some point. And then every person will have, their peak moment. When you're 85, you won't be at your peak physical moment, but you could move with perfect balance and beat the shit out of a 20-year-old without hurting them, if you got so good at jujitsu and you preserve the option to hit him, if maybe even bite him if he ain't gonna behave. Like, there's no rules in
I want to
self-defense.
want to ask you on with the clubs in particular. It was the first time, like the that I started, obviously, single handed opening up as we're doing the casting out, the fishing rod casting is something that really opens up the sub scout. But first time I had to put it in two hands and really get to the bottom of a position completely coiled over.
Yes.
I could see such major imbalances from right to left, and it really didn't depend on like which handedness I was. It had to do with like which position I felt more comfortable in.
Yes.
And to me, I was like, dude, this is mind blowing because of the fact that clearly, when I think of like mobility, right? Mobility became important because if you get to an end range and it's short of where you should be, that can result in injury, right? It's like, where's the
Right.
weakest link in your body? But it's beyond mobility, it's accessibility, right? Because now we're talking about putting ourselves in a position where we're fully opened up and coiled into one position, and we have to work out of that. As another thing that I really liked from Pavel Tatsulin, he talks about in his book Easy Strength called Greasing the Groove.
Yes.
And so his main thing is greasing the groove on, push, pull, squat, hinge, twist. And most of that greasing the groove, though, we lock into, this basic X pattern stuff we see in the gym, put bench press, pull ups, squat, everything's right in front of you. Even a lunge, everything's just right in front of you. Whereas what I was noticing with the club was I was forcing my body. I was being asked to get into a deeper and deeper and deeper position with deeper rotation, which in and of itself was uncomfortable. And then now have to move from that position athletically out into another athletic position. And just those reps over and over again started to grease the groove on that super odd pathway, which was giving me balance, was giving me mobility, was giving me more access in the spine, and it was allowing me to find power in an uncomfortable position. Right, it was allowing me to find some level of equanimity and confidence in a coiled position. So I'd love for you to talk. I'd love for you to break down, like, did coiling come during this? Did it come before it? Where did you start to figure out what the point was and break coiling down for us? Because I think it's such a cool thing that you've really brought to the table. Anatomy trains, how do these fit into the equation here?
Yeah. So the coiling core training is really our signature contribution, because the idea is we want to master the side and we want to master the side. And what we want to do is master it through the polarity that the long side is the longest that it could possibly be. So there's no slack in the system. And this corresponding, the more I go long here, the more I can compress and coil here. And I want this to get to a position of balance and strength where you could drive 2,000 pounds through my palm and I'm here like this wedged in, and 2,000 pounds I'll support because I'm wedging it into the coil. So what comes through here comes through here to proximal. And I can be internal and I can be external. And when I have established those two positions, that is the fundamental poise to pounce. I can set up in like a start position where I can be right here ready to go, and I'm not getting tired because the bone structure is doing the force transmission, maintaining the congruency of the spine and the shin, and then coiling to differentiation. I could sit there for a minute and still go on an instant because I'm not getting tired and I am ready. My first movement is productive from the reflexive level. And so when I own the position and I own the position, now I have somewhere that I could go to and I can snap into that coil like that. And it's the position where I am my strongest. And if the force were overwhelming me, well, then I just use that force to direct my center away from the force. So even if it's stronger and overwhelming, I still preserve my balance by not letting him capture my balance, right? And I'm extremely strong with both sides of my body, boom, contributing to that one-sided action, because everybody knows, you're going to throw a punch, you got to do the offhand correctly if the punch is going to be the best punch it can be, right? So that that aspect of using the fundamental tools to sort of get that fluidity is what bridges the transition from those fundamental positions. So we spend a lot of time establishing that side position, And we define it as if I'm just staying on one side, that's coiling core training. But as soon as I take it across the midline, now it becomes rotational movement training. But we do spend a lot of time in just coiling core to get that position on the side solidified and always reinforcing it, polishing it when it's perfect, right? So you're just getting incrementally deeper and deeper and deeper with the technique that makes it more perfect, more perfect, more perfect. And when your intent is going inward, you can make orders of magnitude progress because you're just going deeper and deeper. If the goal is external, well, order of magnitude really doesn't exist because, if I run 10 seconds in the 100, I'm never going to run 1 second, right? That would be an order of magnitude improvement. If I bench 100, can I bench 1,000? No matter how hard I try. So this wisdom of going inside will exponentially improve the coordination that you'll be able to perform strength feats through the technique and manipulation that makes you stronger in a actually I can do it sense than the guy who is stronger than you who doesn't know the trick. Right? And in martial art, as soon as there's a new trick, it works until everybody else learns the trick. I mean, jujitsu itself is what started the UFC. And it was a trick that, if I'm Frank Shamrock, I could get in a guillotine because I wrestle. And if I wrestle, it's sort of anathema that I'm going to lay on my back. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like you've been conditioned your whole life that that's the worst thing that could ever happen. And meanwhile, you play jujitsu, some guy will pull guard, go right to that position, which makes it more useful for self defense. But like you said, a good wrestler, he'll be a better jujitsu player once he sort of, channels that to the rules of jujitsu. But yeah, so and then so we have the coiling core training, the RMT rotational movement training, and then we have the bilateral torsion, where what we're thinking in terms of is the torsional and the torsional, which encapsulates the flexion, extension, the adduction, abduction. So I don't want to think in terms of like dividing planes into, oh, this is for training, sagittal.
Mm.
This is for training that. I think that that is such a limited approach that it removes you from finding the truth if you are always going to be that mechanistic, because we aren't door hinges. We are this complex balls and sockets and articulating things that the spiral dynamic is the structure and functional relationship of the human body. So even a biceps curl is not some pure flexion, right? Which way is
Mm.
the beach house? Is it that way or that way? So yeah, so and that really, no one else had done this approach, and we have visual equity because we've never seen like this. And I can make it as specific to what you do with your hands and then what is the intent with your hands. And I wouldn't
Mm.
understand that the way I do had it not been for the Eastern perspective to inform the Western, because these all associate with meridians. And when you understand the coherence between these meridians and the Western understanding of fascia, well, you learn the importance of the ring finger, because the ring finger can't rise up like this, like the middle, like the pinky, like the index. So when my intent goes to chasing the fourth finger with the thumb, what it does is if I did it with the middle finger, it'll just take me out. If I'm trying to move this, it'll take me out. But if I use the fourth, what it does is it goes, but then it funnels to center. And it just so happens that the meridian that goes to the ring finger, it was called an imaginary organ when I learned it. So you have a liver meridian, you got a lung meridian, you got a spleen, you got all the gallbladder, and now you have the triple energizer, or the sanjiao, or the triple warmer, triple heater, whatever the fuck you call it. It's like, oh, it's an imaginary organ. But now when I've done more and more reading, what I come to find out is that it is the organ of form. It is the fascial construction that it suspends, separates, and surrounds everything. That's the significance of the ring finger. And when you learn how to ring the wrist and ring the hand, you are now creating a point in space that the entire body can orient around. So this becomes an axis of rotation in point eight. Eight is infinity to the pericardium. That's the castle for the king called the heart, the way I interpret it. So this is infinite. This is infinite. Rope flow is two infinities integrating, in all different manner. My Bosu logo is two infinities, right? So the fact that we're able to derive and describe infinities with each hand, I mean, it's just good metaphor for what's ultimately, possible for your capacity. Could we do something that we would not believe to be possible now at some point in the future, just because somebody gave you the code to the lock, as it were, right? So I like being grandiose. I like being quote unquote unrealistic because even if you fall short, maybe you're a lot further ahead than just being realistic. It's an
I
interesting
like
way to
that.
manipulate the motivation.
I like that. Well, what came after? Did the Pro Pulse come next? What comes after the RMT Club?
RMT Club. I have Soul Steps, which is a sort of a platform for the feet with a patented
Yes. Talk
pitch.
about that. That's
So
fantastic.
yeah, and I have them under my desk because even sitting and putting your feet on them just feels better. Like your legs weigh something, and there's a give and go to the forces. So a soul step is basically the this is the highest part under the inside ball of the foot, and the outside ball of the foot's the lowest point. So what that allows us to do is allows us to create dorsiflexion to limit where, and this high part acts as like cocking the spring so that I can go to a position with this limiter that I would be in motion if I didn't have it. So I'm able to
Mm.
suspend myself right at that point of departure with the shin angle and with everything just perfectly ready to go. So I'm in that poised to pounce an nth degree further, where if I didn't have this, I'm actually pouncing. So this increases the poise of the pounce. And then the inside heel bone is higher than the outside ball of the foot. So we get this dual action where the forces of your weight are being driven forward and lateral, because the lateral is where you're going to initiate athletic movement, and cocking the spring here to the big toe that lets us go further forward before we go inside. And most of the problems with feet involves like pronating early, so the knee is going inside before the knee has passed the toes. So once the knee
Mm.
passes the toes, you can windshield wiper. You probably know that from jujitsu, right? You can windshield wiper.
Mm.
Your foot could be on the ground. You can move the knee and still keep the vertical force perfect, right? When you do certain arrangement with it, if the knee is past the toe. But if the knee is behind the toes, now the whole foot becomes clamped down and the knee doesn't hinge that way. And it could either be a long, slow, repetitive stress that wears you down, or it could be one event on the athletic field that sends you to the surgeon. So the soul steps give you that. Then you can flip them around, and they're weightlifting shoes with a lateralization. And the lateralization is how we unify the first layer of the foot, which is the fourth and fifth metatarsals, and the big toe, second toe, third toe actually connect above the heel bone to the talus. These two, four and five, go to the heel bone, the calcaneus. So when I am able to establish my balance on the outside ball of the foot that captures all of the power of the heel, that is the go, and then the inside is the go to. And
Mm.
if I'm going straight, I want that to be very clean. If I'm cutting an angle, I might stab with the inside first to make the shin here as a wide receiver, but it still has to have integration with the strong outside portion so that
You
it's
call that
not.
the green dot?
Yeah, the green dot is what we call that, and then inside here would be the blue dot. So
Okay,
it's go and go to. So Soul Steps came about. I had been working on them for more than a decade, and I was sort of working under the premise of the Weck deck, and the arc or the pitch, the combination of angles on the Soul Steps equates with a similar relationship of those 4 points when you're on the Bosu ball in a very specific position. So I even designed the Bosu Elite to indicate that position. And it was existing and training in that position where I learned more pelvic relationship, so I can do internal and external better as you know, from being in that loaded strategy. And so this soul step is essentially like solidifying that, so there's no give or play, but with that same relationship of coming here and coming there. So, you know, depending upon the arrangement of these 4 points, that if you put them right here, that's the patented pitch. And
very cool.
we're turning that into what we call the X deck that will launch in 26, which is a big version of it that pieces together in like, you know, many different ways, so you can it has utility beyond just the patented pitch. And it's a foam with a rubber coating that we optimized for barefoot training. So you can get on this thing barefoot, and it is like it's like a riverbed. You know, it's not too hard, not too soft. You know, you sink in, but you barely see the sink in kind of a thing. And so very friendly for barefoot training. Um,
Very cool.
well, the big invention now, and this is the big one, is the Propulse Power Vest. This thing here, I wear it all day, every day. This one has 12 of these cartridges where there's a weight and a spring, and it literally bounces out of your hand when you apply the downforce to it. And what this does is this happens in between when you land and when you launch. So you land without the burden of the weight, then the weight hits and disappears, and now you launch with the benefit of the up force from the spring and the weight. So we can run up a hill faster wearing the power vest than not wearing the power vest. So you mean to tell me you can run upstairs faster by putting 12 pounds or 10 pounds on your body? Like, how's that supposed to work? And before this came the hand pulsers, because
Yep.
finding a weight and a spring in the distance, everything very difficult to do when you're starting from nothing. You know, like how do you even, you know, give the specs for the spring that you want? You know, what? Well, do you want music wire? Do you want this? Or how many coils do you want? You know, what's the diameter? Like, I have no idea. And I happened to find one, and I got it. But the concept of the other ones was sort of like BBs in a jar with space. And what that does is it removes the effects of inertia acting upon your body. Because when I hit, the weight is all here. So I don't stop the weight, I stop the container. And then the weight hits and snaps me back like the doctor just tapped your knee and your foot goes. That's not volition. It happened as a consequence of this connective tissue recoil that this gives me. And you'll run faster up a hill with these in your hands than you will without. That's weird. And so this invention here with the vest, there's zero learning curve. It encourages movement. It makes jumping like you spend less energy. It doesn't hurt your knees. My 87-year-old mom can hold on to the counter and sort of plyometrics. Doesn't even need to leave the ground. And the story that I think is really pivotal to this is the skeleton and osteoporosis and the lymphatic system, and how movement and plyometrics flushes lymphatic, right? So from a health standpoint, I can picture, you know, the demographic that's the biggest, that's only getting older in need of more remedy. Well, who can't benefit? And the catch all is that it makes athletes faster. Oh, okay. Well, if it God's honest makes athletes faster, it doesn't matter what the coach wants. It makes you faster, right? And it's not illegal. It's not steroids. So okay, how many people take steroids and say they don't because it gives you a distinct advantage? Okay, a lot more than a lot more than we probably are led on to, right? Just like fixing
Yeah.
games, the whole world has turned crazy. I think I think physical education is our salvation. Because if we can instill that confidence in an individual that they can root and resonate, well, then maybe you don't get stabbed in the arm, every 2 months just because they tell you, right? Maybe you do, just walk into the store without a mask on because I'm not going to comply this time, right? But if you're insecure in yourself when nothing's happening and you don't even know that that's a causal factor or source of insecurity, now you're just frustrated and angry because you got a problem and you don't know how to solve it. And then solving it means go to the gym and pump up even harder and keep yourself braced because I'm strong. Oh yeah, but how long are you strong? You're weak, right? You got weak mental resolve, right? I mean, it's not about being in sports, it is about being better than the other guy, but in life, pick your lane and be better at what you can be better at. Like, I can't do NFL football, right? So get over it. Go do something else that you can compete at. And then ultimately compare your results to who you were or would have been. All right. You can log a win that way. Right. And all you need to do is believe it. That's the hard part. Tony Little said, conceive, believe, achieve. And I think the hard part's believe because you can
Yeah.
think of anything. You can think of anything, but does your solution actually work? There's a lot of wishful, hopeful thinking, right? And when it's not working, okay, well, you can either go broke not dealing with it or you pivot and move and, deal with it. And you can always come back to things, right? So I really think that it's a paradigm shift in understanding how to walk like we used to. Locomotion 1.0, calories are precious. They're not doing burpees, they're going out to hunt. That's what they're doing. Right? They probably played games and had foot races and wrestling matches and all that stuff. And I would bet that that was the time when they sprinted the fastest because if a saber-toothed tiger is chasing you, running doesn't solve the problem. And running your fastest is probably worse. You know what I mean? So you have to, at some point, fight is the requirement when you're just outmatched in the flight, and you can use tools to create the weapon that wins the fight, which lets you live to see another day until ultimately you can make an airplane and not get eaten by a tiger. Put them in a zoo, right? We have the we have the capacity. Lions, tigers, and bears. I mean, they're not a problem because we had a stick, and now we have more. So you can't lose sight of the root and the fundamentals. What got you to where you are? Because that's the reality. So you can't deny the past. You have to deal with it and make the present better than the past, given the circumstances where the past brought you to present. I mean, these
Yeah, I
are
think
it boils down to like strategies for living, strategies for winning at life. If you can do sort of actions and mental gymnastics that coincide, and best thing to do is stick to the truth, make sure you got it and stick to it. But that's, I think, the key to my success is really the persistence and the tenacity that I'm never going to stop. Like and once I made it, well, what's to do? Make it better, right? Because if you get complacent, satisfied with best, well, somebody's going to eventually be better. And you had a head start, didn't keep on going. What the hell were you thinking about?
Rocky 3.
Yeah, well,
He's got
when you were
all
talking
the
about
money. Yeah.
when you were talking about throwing the ball against the wall, I'm thinking Rocky, what did he do? He had like a little ball and he bounced it. You know, when he was going to make his collections, he was bouncing a ball, right? What are the things that you can do when you're doing other things that make you better? I mean, that's how you train your feet. You can't do 3 sets of 8 and expect your feet to be better. Your feet is like, oh no, you're watching Netflix and you're just rolling something under your feet. You know, if you want to be the best, there's certain body parts that require a lot of time to transform and get strong. And so, I mean, Kobe Bryant, I just saw something recently on Kobe Bryant. At halftime, everybody else was on their phone, social media, lining up the girls for after the game, whatever they're doing. And Kobe Bryant would be watching first half footage to gain advantage in the second half. And if I had to pick an athlete to emulate in terms of I want to win, well, I'm not going to go to, Instagram. I'm going to watch what that guy did in the first half. And how can I use that information to beat him better in the second half? Right? So I think that inspiring people to say, you know what, even if you don't know what to do, start doing something. And even if the car's going in the wrong direction, you can turn it when it's moving. But if you're just in neutral
Mhm.
sitting there, it doesn't matter you're the right direction or wrong direction. You're going nowhere. And I think so much of it is just the fear of the unknown, the fear of failure, like, losing sight of, the ball that's in your court. And I think that for me, if you learn how to comport yourself such that you are never out of balance, your body is just fluidly changing its weight with 100% coherence. I think it has a way of canceling a lot of ambient noise within you that you don't even realize is gumming up the signal, right? Because again, we're back to the you can't buy it and you can't fake it. You can't. I mean, if you don't know jujitsu, you can't buy jujitsu and you can't fake jujitsu. Doesn't matter that you're a lot stronger. That guy's going to make you tap. It's just going to happen because you don't know the game yet.
Well, something I love so much about diving into all this stuff, and it's really only been the last year. I mean, I knew who you were long before a year ago, but really like taking the deep dive into your tools and working with Connor consistently, um, is that, the first thing it reminded me of was like, in the diet world, people got into the paleo diet. They got into it and they're like, all right, well, maybe we can still use some grains if they're fermented or something else, which we can add in some new things here. And it doesn't have to be a one size fits all approach. But let's think ancestrally, right? People thought back to the past, what worked for the longest amount of time. When was this new stuff introduced? Maybe we rewind the clock and then take things one step at a time to see if we can reintroduce those things and how does that impact us. And that makes a lot of sense as a framework. It doesn't mean the past is better than now or the future, but as we must learn what got us here and integrate that and take it with us, right? We don't just graduate and discard. We graduate and we integrate. We have to take it with us. And what you've done with movement is such an awesome way to reframe how we look at it. Pavel said he said strength is a practice, right? It's not calories burnt, calories lost. It's not a muscle building bench. Bodybuilder is different category, right? Powerlifter is different category. But for most of us, strength should be a practice, just as yoga is a practice, meditation is a practice, and movement is the practice. I think for a lot of us, so consumed with 1980s growing up, you got Arnold Schwarzenegger and Stallone and Van Damme and all these shredded buff dudes on the gas, and we're every kind of muscle max coming out. Everyone's at Gold's at Venice. And all the movie stars became that for a minute. Pro wrestlers the same, Hulkamania, Macho Man, all the way to The Rock. So like those are our heroes. I want to be like that. How do they do that? Oh, they got this whole magazine on how I can do a Darren Charles 21-inch arm, Darren McGraw. I'm going to get my arms to be big. And in the process of that, we get stiff. We become less athletic. There's no application in sport. People like Barry Bonds who've lifted traditionally, I can't believe it. Like how good was he as an athlete
Oh yeah,
to, number
yeah.
one, be a Hall of Famer before any steroids were in the equation, but then to improve to the level he did using traditional bodybuilding techniques and juice. So it's like this guy is a freak of nature, easily the best offensive baseball player of all time. But how much better would he have been if he was working with someone like you or Paul Chek? Like it would have just been immensely better, and that's hard to believe.
Yeah.
But I think for so many of us, something that's really resonating with me, and this happened, before I made the commitment to be the best athlete I could be 10 years after retiring from fighting, not to fight again, not to do anything else. And I had different goals. I got into powerlifting, I got into distance running, I ran an ultra marathon. All that was just pushing. How far can I push myself? But going back to working in and getting into these positions where it's an internal game, I think is so valuable for people because it's a reframe from how do I train? Why do I train? What's it all for? Right. And if it's about being a better athlete and moving better and having more access to me, that has benefits that go far beyond the body. And that's something I think you've alluded to throughout this conversation that's so important, is that our confidence is there. It's different. Our way of being is different. When you talk longevity, you got guys like David Sinclair trying to find, the magic pill with resveratrol injections and shit like that. And he runs once or twice a month. That's all he does. It's like, that's not longevity, right? Longevity is understanding this vehicle to the best of our abilities, feeding it what it needs, getting enough rest, but also moving properly. And
Well,
when you think
there's
about,
also, no, I'm sorry, I just want to say there's
good.
longevity and there's also being miserable. So if I had to do a certain protocol to live to 500, but it involved like, oh, I can only do this or that. I don't know. I might take, 80, 90 quality years eating meat and having some fun as opposed to some strategy where the goal is just the endurance, like quality
Yeah.
and quantity, quality, right? So anyway, sorry to interrupt, but I just like that it went to my mind, and you described the '80s perfectly, and then it was. Think about this, Dominic Cruz, right? I'm friends with Dominic, and Dominic was just one day telling me, he's like, "Do you realize the evolution of MMA and how 20 years ago it was something and how far advanced the martial arts have become?" And before MMA, I think the legit fighters were the guys who were boxers and the guys who were wrestlers. And most of the other martial arts were, I got my black belt next to the laundromat and the soft serve ice cream. And, I still in Cub Scouts burning bugs when I'm 16, kind of like that was my impression, you know what I mean, of the
Yeah.
martial artists, and the wrestlers were the badasses. And I don't even think I knew a boxer. There was no boxing in high school. And like, okay, maybe that one kid's dad boxed and he learned a little. But where I wasn't in Detroit, I wasn't in Philly. So, so the badass legits were wrestlers. And now the MMA, I mean, it's just a whole, you got to be honest right now because the level of these fighters has evolved. I mean, you look at 1970s football. I mean, the offensive lineman, you're, 205 pounds or whatever you are. OJ Simpson's the baddest ass guy on the field. No, you bring, some of these guys today. I mean, they're just a different animal. And I think that the MMA, back to that and its evolution and success, I think that probably had more to do with sort of the guys who I idolize. It was Arnold, it was Tom Platz, it was Sylvester Stallone. Size and looks was everything, and you got a performance benefit from it, right? You're better at football if you're 20 pounds more muscle. You just are,
Hmm.
right? But I think the MMA and someone's prowess is more sexy today than it was in the past, where you required the bodybuilder physique, ripped and muscular. That was once like the sexiest that you could be. Otherwise, you need money. But now, this is true. So now I think, the prowess of the individual means that like it's a different zone that is most attractive to both men and women, because there's nothing
Yeah.
worse than being some inflated guy who gets punched in the nose by the skinny guy. Like, and even like rope flow, the reason why rope flow is starting to now like enjoy its next big jump is because the big strong guys are doing it. Like if you see a guy that's bigger than you and he's doing a rope, that's going to make far more impression than a skinny little guy like me that you can dismiss that fast. But I'm not a hippie. Why am I going to twirl a fucking rope? Like, what's that going to do for me? Well, it ties everything together and takes all those muscles and makes them better, right? But we, I think the birds and the bees are going to sort of be the thing that keeps the game going with a drive that we don't control. I mean, somebody attractive walks by, bang, you didn't think of the pink elephant. It just appeared in your mind. Right? You had this unexplainable draw to move closer. Right? And that's what allows the game to go on. Right? That's the most fundamental thing there is. And I think getting back to this true confidence, regardless of how you present, because some people can't look like Arnold, but they could learn jujitsu,
Yeah.
right? And there's nothing cooler than seeing a guy who you would just dismiss physically, and then you watch him kick a bag like 6 feet in the air, and holy shit, if that hit a head, you're in big trouble. And the guy knows judo, so he didn't need to get on the ground with you. He's a boom. I love when that
Yeah,
happens.
that resonates. I like seeing, like the videos sometimes that go around online of a kid getting bullied at school, and it's
Yes.
clear because everyone's got their cameras out, and the kid's like he's clearly being bullied. He gets pushed or slapped in the face, something where and he doesn't retaliate. Then he finally reluctantly takes his backpack off, or she does, and just whoops the dude's ass with an armbar or some nasty choke, and you're just like, God, yeah. Bullies should at least be aware that this exists.
Yeah.
I think word gets out before, it'd be like, oh, that guy's got a black belt in Taekwondo. I remember people saying that in high school, and I'd be like, I wrestle,
Yeah.
I'm not worried
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Right.
But now, you've got kids that are competing in ADCC, at 10 years old. They're doing, obviously that's the kid stuff, but
Yeah.
there's a ranking system. We have a couple kids at our academy that are ranked in the top 10 in the world for 10, 11, 12 years old. And it's like, those are guys you don't want to pick on. And I think, to part of the reason I want my kids to both be black belts in jiu-jitsu is not just for the self-defense aspect,
Yeah.
but because of the character that builds from white to black. It's baked into the system. They're going to be better at being human. They're going to be more humble. They're going to have better character. They're going to be more they're going to understand the self. They'll know thyself in ways that are kind of hard to imagine without that course of action. So, but
It's
dude,
such,
I love
it's such
everything you're doing.
it's such a wonderful art because it allows you to play at full speed. So if you're going to go in study striking, okay, you're going to incur damage if you take it to 100%. But in jujitsu, as long as you sort of have the priorities right and both people are there for the right reasons, you can pretty much go all out. You get a little tweaks and stuff every now and again, but you can get to such a high level because you can practice at a high level. And that makes it worth its weight in gold. Because you can do it when you're 70 years old and beat a younger kid just because you've been doing it.
As
I
long as you're
love it.
taking care of your body. So that's where all this fun stuff comes in with the work you guys are doing. This is how you take care of yourself.
Yep.
I've had a blast getting to know Connor and getting to know you. I'm still, it's on my bucket list to get out to San Diego and train with
Yeah.
you. So I want to come out. We'll do one face to face. I'll bring my camera and we'll get some solid training in, and hopefully I don't
Awesome.
embarrass myself. Hopefully Connor gets
Well,
me to
no, I'll
blue
tell
belt
you,
level at some of these
I
things.
know how, well, I know how to solve that issue. Is we just go in the octagon and you have your way, and you'll feel great, and then we'll make. Uh, well, thank you for the
Fantastic. Well, listen,
Thank you.
sorry, just tell us, and my pleasure, David. Tell people where they can find all this awesome stuff. Again, I have no affiliation. I'm just a huge fan. I've been a fan for a while, and now in this past year and a half, really taken a deep dive into many of your tools. So I have a deep resonance and understanding of them, and a huge gratitude for everything you're doing. Where can people find you online and follow you? And where can people, learn more about these awesome tools you've invented, and perhaps grab some for the holidays to take care of themselves?
Weck Method, WECK method.com is the website. People can find everything there. We're Weck Method on the socials, and it's the David Weck on Instagram and X. And those are the two that I do. I have a YouTube, and I think I'm going to start doing it. I have never really focused on it, but I think the long form lends itself to sort of who I am, and so people will be able to find YouTube as well. But those are
Cool.
the
Well,
David Weck.
you like me will have to be mindful of how we speak on YouTube. Otherwise, shadow bans are on the way. So hopefully, whoever's pulling the strings decides to not drop Disease X anytime soon, because I'll be getting shadow banned everywhere once again, telling the truth about all that bullshit.
I know. Yeah, unfortunately.
All righty, brother. Well, thank you so much, David. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time, and I can't wait to get to train with you soon this year, hopefully.
That sounds amazing. And then just when you publish, let me know and we'll promote.